I'm Carl Azusa. This is CNN Student News. Thanks for watching. In Boston, authorities are letting residents and business owners back into the area where last week's terror attack happened. Yesterday, there were private services for two of the victims of last week's violence, 8-year-old Martin Richard and MIT police officer Sean Collier. The surviving suspect, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, is in the hospital. He couldn't appear in front of a judge, so on Monday, a judge came to him. That's when the suspect was read his Miranda rights. We explained what those are in yesterday's show. The suspect has been communicating with investigators. He's suggested that he and his brother, the other suspect, were not members of a terrorist group. He also indicated that his brother, who died after a shootout with police, directed last week's attack. Security cameras were a big part of identifying the bombing suspects. But for some people, these cameras raise a debate of privacy versus security. Alan Constantini of affiliate KARE has more on that.
Where's the line? How do we set it up so that we don't lose that sense of not being under a constant observation?
Minnesota Civil Liberties Union Executive Director Charles Samuelson says he realizes that private surveillance cameras were used by Boston authorities to identify the two suspects in the Marathon bombings a week ago. The question is, can such wide use of video surveillance impinge on individual liberties?
If you create a society where everything is on videotape or actually direct-to-digital media kind of stuff, where everything is recorded and everything is kept forever, you have absolutely no privacy.
The flip side of that concern, as you might imagine, comes from the people running some of the cameras.
Well, this is a public safety camera system, so this is an umbrella of safety, if you will, for the public. It allows us as a police department to take a look at some of our key business corridors.
Commander Scott Gerlicher runs the Minneapolis Police Strategic Information Center, where more than 100 cameras are manned 7 days a week. He says they have their eyes on the hundreds of privately owned surveillance cameras in the city.
And we hope to be able to tap into that in the coming months and years.
In the debate involving privacy and security, we'd like to know which side you land on. Find us on our blog at cnnstudentnews.com. It's first names only, so no last initials or schools or teachers. Please let us know your thoughts on cameras, security, and privacy. We're going to check out some international news now with stories from 3 different continents, starting in northern Africa and an attack in Tripoli, the capital city of Libya. Tuesday morning, a car bomb exploded there outside of the French embassy. It was so powerful, it blew the front wall off the building and blew out windows in nearby neighborhoods. No one was killed, but 2 French security guards and a local teenager were injured. Investigators are trying to figure out who's behind the attack. Next, Asia, recovery efforts in central China's Sichuan province following a deadly earthquake. Since the original quake hit on Saturday, there have been more than 2,000 aftershocks. Those are making recovery efforts harder because the tremors could cause landslides or more damage. Latest reports say more than 190 people have been killed, more than 11,000 have been injured, more than 20 people are still missing. Finally, in Europe, a vote in France on the issue of same-sex marriage. Yesterday, French lawmakers voted to make same-sex marriage legal. The bill has to be signed by France's president before it can become law, and opponents are planning to file a legal challenge against the bill. A lot of countries are split on this issue. But if the bill in France does become law, it'll be the 14th nation to legalize same-sex marriage.
Is this legit? The TSA is responsible for training U.S. air traffic controllers. Not true. Most air traffic controllers receive training from the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration.
And because fewer air traffic controllers are working at the moment, some airline flights are running late. This goes back to something we told you about earlier this year. Congress and the president weren't able to agree on a way to cut down the government's spending and debt, so automatic spending cuts kicked in. Politicians generally didn't want that to happen, but because they couldn't compromise on a deal, there's been an $85 billion reduction in government spending on a variety of programs. For the most part, the cuts haven't had as much of an impact on Americans as President Obama said they would. But he did warn there'd be more delays at airports. And because of the spending cuts, some air traffic controllers have been furloughed, forced to take time off without pay. That's caused flight delays across the country, some a few minutes, some a few hours. On Monday, the FAA said there were 1,200 flight delays due to the budget cuts. There were 1,400 due to other reasons like weather. The FAA says the furloughs won't impact safety.
If there's some cost cutting and I don't feel it too badly, I'm all for it. If it becomes painful, then I think we need to figure out another way to deal with things.
We're all going to pay the price. So what can you do? You grin and bear it.
But if you or someone you know is planning to fly, the FAA recommends you book early direct flights. Try to avoid heavy travel days like Mondays and Fridays and keep track of your flight time online.
Today's shout out goes out to Mr. Mayo's government classes at Crestview High School in Ashland, Ohio. Where would you find the Hellas Impact Basin, Olympus Mons, and Utopia Planitia? Here we go now. Are they in Greece, Middle Earth, the Bermuda Triangle, or on Mars? You've got 3 seconds. Go. Those are some of the physical landmarks on the red planet of Mars. That's your answer, and that's your shout out.
Of course, no one's ever seen those in person. In science fiction, humans have been going to Mars for decades, but in reality, at least not yet. One company is signing up volunteers. Now, this is for real. They're looking for people who want to go to Mars. The scheduled departure, if they can raise enough money for the trip, is the year 2022, with a return schedule for never. Zane Vergee explains.
A one-way ticket to Mars. It sounds like science fiction, but it just became reality. Mars One is accepting applications from interplanetary pioneers. You must be willing to go further than any human has ever been to live on another world. The criteria: you need to be adaptable, resilient, resourceful, and a team player. You would be the new Christopher Columbus or Magellan, but there are downsides. No oceans, no trees, no morning cup of coffee. Instead, dust storms, barren deserts, volcanoes, and the biggest downside of all, you can never return. But Marsonauts won't be taking off anytime soon. First, they'll undergo 8 years of intensive training, isolated from the rest of the world, learning to live in close spaces. They'll take off on their mission in 2022. No human has ever stepped foot on the red planet. It could be you.
So on one hand, you could be one of the first humans to set foot on Mars. On the other, you'd never be able to come back. What do you guys think of this? If you're on Facebook, go to facebook.com/CNN Student News and talk to us about this one-way extraterrestrial ticket. Chris Hadfield is already closer to Mars than you or I. He's an astronaut. He's been on the International Space Station since December. While he's there, he's been making videos showing how routine things are a little different in space.
I filled a water bag. This has drinking water in it. And I'm going to squirt a bunch of water into this washcloth. Okay. So here's a soaking wet washcloth. Get the microphone so you can hear me while I'm talking. And now let's start wringing it out. It's really wet. It's becoming a tube of water. The water's all over my hands. In fact, it wrings out of the cloth into my hands. And if I let go of the cloth carefully, the water sort of has it stick to my hand.
I wonder if he realized that a test of that theory would be waterproof. Maybe he did a few dry runs first. You know what they call that experiment if you do it by the 6th planet from the sun? The rings of Saturn. I mean, it's kind of a stretch, but we had space for just one more. Have a great day.